A false calm had fallen over North Vietnam. While politicians wrangled in Paris, U.S. prisoners in Hanoi heard no friendly warplanes overhead for more than 3 years. But in 1972, talk gave way to action, and speeches to a new air campaign. From the land bases and the carrier decks, the jets flew north again. In the spring of 1972, the Communists unleashed a full-scale offensive against South Vietnam. As part of President Richard Nixon's plan to wind down the war, most American ground troops had been withdrawn from the combat zone, so it was up to air power to support the South Vietnamese in their fight for survival. But Allied air power had fallen dramatically from the peak years of 1968 and 69. At the beginning of April, the B-52 force was put on standby for a massive operation to stem the NVA offensive. On April 6th, the first break in the weather allowed fighter bombers to go into action, initially against the NVA in the south. For the first time, the North Vietnamese deployed the deadly SA-2 missile in the south. By April 9th, air power started to take its toll. In one instance, 2 cells of 3 B-52s destroyed an entire NVA tank battalion. In all, 285 tanks were destroyed in the 4.5 months of the communist assault. B-52 operations against the southern portion of North Vietnam began on April 9th. Over the next week, operations included most major target complexes from Thanh Hoa south. By April 16th, the areas immediately surrounding Hanoi and Haiphong had been added to the B-52 target list. By the beginning of May, there were 6 carriers online at Yankee Station. On May 8th, they received the news that President Nixon had authorized the mining of Haiphong, Cam Pha, and the Red River Delta. The United States, too late in the war, was finally getting serious about hitting the North Vietnamese supply line where it hurt. Having started bombing the North after a pause of 4 years, President Nixon expanded the air operation, now called Linebacker. By mid-May, missions in the southern route succeeded in knocking out the pumping facilities for the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which supported the trucks and tanks of the NVA in the south. Aircraft taking part in Linebacker were equipped with new weapons which had not been available during Rolling Thunder. Precision-guided weapons were used in large numbers for the first time. In the 11-day war, there was only one night of clear weather good enough for visual bombing, but the B-52s still came. In all, 15 B-52s were lost, from a total of 729 sorties. By the end of the period, tactics had been refined to the point where 113 B-52s were all over the target area within the space of 15 minutes and suffered no losses. The B-52 raids were immensely destructive. The bombers were credited with destroying a quarter of Vietnam's petroleum reserve and 80% of the country's electricity generating capacity. The attacks smashed armament factories, military barracks, railways, roads, bridges, and communications centers. Vietnam's entire stock of surface-to-air missiles had been fired off, and since Haiphong and other harbors had been closed by mines, there was no resupply. Hanoi's war-making capability was at an end, smashed by U.S. air power.
I think the main impact of the Christmas bombing was on the morale of our POWs, who heard a lot of it and cheered from inside the prisons where they were held in the North. I'm not sure that it had the effect that the Nixon administration claimed that it did, of impelling the North to arrive at a satisfactory armistice arrangement. They agreed to a ceasefire only after we stopped insisting that they remove their troops from the South.
The offensive brought the North Vietnamese back to the peace talks, ready to make a deal. Linebacker 2 allowed America to withdraw from Vietnam, but for the South it was a temporary reprieve. Without American air power, Saigon was doomed to fall.